Hey guys, and Happy New Year again. 2016 is over, so to properly send off 2016, I'm going to be talking about my 15 favorite movies of 2016. Again, I feel like 2016 will be remembered as a bad year for big movies, but among the 153 films I saw in 2016, but I know I barely reviewed any of them, I actually saw more good movies than in previous years. So I think your enjoyment of 2016 in terms of movies really depends on how many small independent films you watched and whether or not you like them. And before getting into my list, of course, I have my usual disclaimers. Yes, this is a top 15, not a top 10. It's just what I do. And the films here are only eligible if they were released in the Philippines in 2016 and if they had commercial releases in their countries of origin in 2016. What this means is that even if we got movies like Spotlight, Room, and Brooklyn in 2016, they officially came out in 2015, so I can't put them on the list. Additionally, you're not gonna see movies like La La Land, Arrival, Moonlight, Manchester by the Sea, or Hell or High Water in this list because they simply didn't come out in the Philippines in 2016. And once again, final disclaimer, this is completely my opinion. You are going to disagree with a lot of stuff on this list because it's my personal list of my favorite movies of the year. If you guys have different opinions, I really want to hear what you thought the best movies of 2016 were, so please leave me a comment down below. So before proceeding with my list, I have a bunch of honorable mentions. Really quickly, The Beatles 8 Days a Week, Captain America Civil War, The Age of Shadows, Finding Dory, I, Daniel Blake, A Monster Calls, The Jungle Book, Green Room, and just missing my list, Hunt for the Wilder People. So without further ado, at number 15 is one of the 8 foreign language films on my list, and this one comes from South Korea. It's a horror film called The Wailing, directed by Na Hong Jin. And this movie is 2.5 hours long, but you don't feel any of it because it's such a well-edited, well-paced movie that on one hand really shows the humor in horror, in showing how people freaking out can be funny, but on the other hand, when it gets intense, it gets really, really intense. And the horror here is so deeply rooted in Korean mythology that it's not just a thrilling film, but it's also sort of like a cultural lesson. It's really interesting, it's really fun, and I'm just really glad that it ended up on my list. Now, my number 14 and my number 13 will be very similar in certain ways and very different in other ways. You will see what I mean, but at number 14 is Moana, directed by Ron Clements and John Musker. This is just such a joyous film to watch. The animation is breathtaking whenever they do anything with the hair and with the ocean. And you've got two really full-bodied characters in this film, voiced by Ali Carvalho and Dwayne Johnson. And of course, the soundtrack in Moana is the best Disney has ever had, well, since the 90s. Not only are the songs really well written, not only are they well composed, not only do they push the story forward, but they also add a lot of culture to the film that really added a great layer on top of it and really helped with the message of just finding out who you are, and I thought that was great. And at number 13, of course, is Zootopia, directed by Byron Howard and Rich Moore, and again, similar reasons. The animation in this movie is really, really fantastic. The world building they did to create this place of Zootopia legitimately sent chills up my spine, and once again, you have two great lead characters voiced by Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman, who really display incredible vulnerability and chemistry with each other. But really the most important thing about Zootopia is the fact that it masquerades as this fun neo-noir mystery film, but it's really a movie about discrimination, and the way it tackles that issue is done so intelligently, and I just, it just got better the more I saw it. Now at number 12 is my favorite local film of the year, and like no one else seems to be talking about this movie, but I will stand by how much I loved Purgatorio, directed by Derek Cabrido. And one of the reasons why I love this movie is, it's, for me, the first film that clearly takes place in 2016 Philippines. It really is so aware of all this violence and death that's been happening in our country over the past few months. It just has this amazing ensemble cast wherein none of the cast members really overshadow anyone else. It's just so smart in addressing this culture of death, sort of, and it never becomes specifically political, but it really shows just the depths of inhumanity that some people have fallen into by trading in humanity for safety. And the way this film is directed just makes you feel so dirty, and it's so creepy and eerie, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Now at number 11 is a movie that I think is not as high as some people would have expected it to be on my list, but that doesn't mean I still don't think it's a great movie, and I'm talking about Sing Street, directed by John Carney. This is a much more bittersweet film than I think some people are selling it as. Like, they keep saying it's a feel-good movie. It's so much deeper than that. Like, ultimately, it becomes a movie about becoming your own source of hope in a really dire situation. I think that's a really beautiful thing. There's terrific performances in this film, especially from Lucy Boynton and Jack Renner. And what they do with music in this movie is so great because they guide you through the songwriting process so that you understand every single lyric in each song that they play, and you just grow this personal connection in each song. It's just masterful filmmaking. Now at number 10 is yet another movie that might not be as high on the list as some people might have been expecting. But again, I still think this film is amazing. And of course, I'm talking about the Chilean film Neruda, directed by Pablo Larraín. And this is not a biopic, it's more a chase film than a biopic, and it metamorphoses into this piece of metafiction about stories and the roles we play in each other's lives, and it's really unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And the way Pablo Larraín directs this movie, he directs it like a poem. That's the best way I can put it. And the two lead performances in this movie from Luis Gnecco, who plays Pablo Neruda, and Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays this policeman chasing him, they're just absolutely phenomenal, and it's just a one-of-a-kind movie. Now, 2016 will be remembered as a year that was great for horror films. We got so many fun, inventive horror movies that, in my opinion, really pushed the genre forward. But the entire year, I was thinking, where are the really amazing horror movies on the level of It Follows and The Babadook and Let the Right One In? You know, movies that really said something and were great movies in themselves. Well, in the last quarter of 2016, we got a couple of them, and one of them was The Witch, directed by Robert Eggers. What was so impressive to me about The Witch was the fact that it feels like it was made in the 17th century. Everything from the production design to the dialogue, and if you find the dialogue kind of tough to listen to, the acting more than makes up for it. This is such a brilliant cast of actors who really just, you know, everything you need to know is in their performances. And the way Robert Eggers directed this movie, like, he just gave everything this unholy atmosphere that really stuck with you long after the movie ended. Now at number 8 is yet another movie that came late in the year, and I was just so happy that so many of my friends decided to catch it in cinemas and not just online. And of course, I am talking about the Japanese animated film Your Name, directed by Makoto Shinkai. This movie is proof that traditional animation will always be a special kind of beautiful. You know, what they do with the visuals in this film are mind-blowing. And it's just, it has such brilliant editing as well, some of the best of the year, some really great voice acting, and it starts out as this really quirky romance, body-switching romance, but it turns into something even greater. It's a story about empathy and human relationships, and it's just so fun. You get so much out of it. Now, my number 7 and number 6 are again similar in some ways and different than others, but these are the ones I feel like if you watch these movies after I've recommended them to you, you'll most likely not enjoy them because they're really slow and they're really artsy, but I personally still love them. So at number 7 is the Romanian film Graduation, directed by Cristian Mungiu. This is a movie that's composed almost entirely of these long takes that are really meant to capture nuance from the actors and really, you know, it tries to immerse you into the setting, and it really does a good job at doing that. You really feel like you're there. The actors have such subtle emotions that they're delivering to the audience. But what makes Graduation really special to me is that it has maybe my favorite script of the entire year. Just the way the script peels back all these little layers and really exposes the corruption in this society and in this family. And it's just plot twist after plot twist, but it's done so naturalistically, and you really, really buy it, and I've just found it riveting. And at number 6 is the other slow movie on this list, and this time it's an Italian documentary called Fire at Sea, directed by Gianfranco Rossi. And just what he does with this movie is he gets impossibly deep meaning out of these long silences throughout the film. You know, your perception of these silences actually changes as you watch the movie, and at the end it becomes really just a documentary about how tragedy has become normalized in certain parts of the world. It's not an information-driven documentary, it's definitely character-driven. What it does is that it juxtaposes these two completely separate narratives that both take place in this one small island, but these narratives never intersect, and it really freaked me out for some reason. But even if you can't really appreciate the pace of Fire at Sea, it still has these haunting visuals that really speak volumes about what it's like to be living in a place that's so used to tragedy. Now at number 5 is my favorite horror film of the year, and that is Under the Shadow, directed by Babak Anvari. This is a UK production, but it's all set in Iran. And what makes Under the Shadow work so much for me is the fact that it's just so simple. It really just, the scares are so simple, and this movie made me afraid of wind. Like, that's how simple it was. But the way the scares are constructed, like, they stay with you even after the scare. Even if it's a jump scare, like, it just makes everything feel so unsafe and creepy, and it just works on so many levels. Like, it works as a straight horror film, it works as a statement about motherhood, and most importantly, it works as sort of like an investigation into the systematic oppression that happens to women in places like Iran. Now at number 4 is my favorite documentary of the year, and this one is called The Palma, directed by Noah Baumbach and Jake Paltrow. This is kind of cheating though, because if you watch De Palma, it's really more of a TED Talk than anything else. It's really just Brian De Palma, the director, sitting in front of a fireplace talking about his entire filmography for about 2 hours. That's it. But it's a treasure trove for film fans, definitely. You learn so much about his techniques and his films and stuff, but at the same time, it's also a really entertaining character study about this guy who's just so interesting and so fun to watch. And most importantly for me, it really teaches you to respect the craft of filmmakers who you might not really be a fan of. I'm not even a big Brian De Palma fan, but I learned to respect like his thought process and his techniques, and I think that's really, really important. Now at number 3 is a movie that I know a lot of people don't like, not just like my friends, but people all over the world like have had different reactions to this film, but I still really, really loved watching it, and that is the French film Elle, directed by Paul Verhoeven. The thing that makes this movie so tough is the fact that it starts with a rape, but then it goes to places you'd never expect. Like, it's just such a challenging exploration of this one woman's reaction to her rape, and it really forces you into her mindset, and she's pretty much a sociopath. Paul Verhoeven really challenges your emotions in this movie, because there are parts that are thrilling and scary, but there are other parts that are legitimately funny, and it really kind of forces you to feel feelings that you might not want to feel. And of course, at the center of it all is an extremely fantastic performance from Isabelle Huppert, who really transforms such a complex character into someone who is so believable you might think they're living right next to you. She is that good, this movie is that good. And at number 2 is probably the best theater experience I ever had in a cinema in 2016, and that is the South Korean film again, The Handmaiden, directed by Park Chan-wook. This movie, first of all, is just insanely beautiful. Like, everything in the production design and the costumes, it looks great. And it's perfectly directed, in my opinion, by Park Chan-wook, be it in the humor or in his twisted thrills. And there's just such rich characterization in this film, all these different characters who you grow so attached to in different ways, and there are just so many amazing plot twists in this movie. It's just twist after twist, but the way they come out, like, it's so unbelievable, but you buy them, and it's just so fun to watch. And even if you might not see a lot of like principles and values by the end of this film, it's really just sheer entertainment, and you really couldn't ask for more. And finally, at number 1, I decided to go with what in my opinion was the most well-rounded film in terms of its excellence. It's a movie that while I was watching it, I felt so much love for filmmaking, and it had a message that really just stuck with me until the end of the year, and that is Kubo and the Two Strings, directed by Travis Knight. Just first of all, the animation alone in Kubo and the Two Strings almost made me cry. It's such well-crafted stop-motion animation, probably the best ever done. But this movie is also just steeped in this melancholy that I had never really seen from an animated film before, and this melancholy kind of turns into wisdom by the end of the movie. It's like you're watching the movie grow up right in front of you. And again, it works on just so many different levels. It's a really fun adventure. It's this serious and poignant meditation on loss, but it's also a celebration of storytelling and what that can do in people's lives. And the way they resolve the conflict at the end of this movie really moves me to tears every single time. It is such a great film, and I think it's the best movie of 2016. Alright, so those are my 15 favorite films of 2016. Please let me know down below if you have seen these movies and what you think of them. And please, 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 if you have your own favorites of 2016, please do share them with me as well. Leave a comment down below. And whatever you guys think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.